Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Reviews, brought to you by Cup of Hemlock Theatre. I am your marketing manager and host, Mackenzie, and tonight, we'll be talking about none other than the Shakespearean comedy, Twelfth Night, that was done in 2011 by the Stratford Festival, and it starred the late, great Brian Dennehy as Sir Toby. But this entire cast was fantastic. I mean, you have Tom Rooney as Malvolio, Sarah Topham as Olivia, Mike Shira as Orsino, Andrea Rung as Viola, Stephen Olmet as Sir Aducheek. It's a fantastic cast that I'm sure we'll get into as well. But with me today, we have a fantastic panel lined up. Returning to us from our Shakespeare and Gender Roundtable, we have Graham. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Mackenzie. It's great to be back.
Yes, thank you. Welcome back. What a perfect episode to make your grand return on.
I know, right? Just Shakespeare. It just gets me so excited.
Clearly. So, Graham, tonight, why don't you tell us what's in your cup?
So right now I am drinking a chocolatey chai tea brewed with oat milk and with a little bit of unrefined sugar in it.
Very nice. Well done. Next, we have returning to our panel once again, Alicia, not Plummer, like Christopher Plummer, just Alicia Plummer.
He is Plummer.
He is Plummer, but not Christopher Plummer, who is not in this production tonight anyway, so. But he was there.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome back. What was the last episode we have you on? Was it Pipeline you were on?
Yes, it was Pipeline.
Very good. Well, welcome back. We're so great to have you coming talk to us about Shakespeare this time around. A totally different topic from the last time you were on with us. And so Tell us, what is in your cup today?
I am drinking black coffee. Just simple and nice.
Mm-hmm. Great. Love that. A great, nice evening pick-me-up as we dive into this, because I'm sure this will be a long review. A lot of people have a lot of things to say. Next, we have a new panelist tonight, a Ms. Donna Latham from the US of A. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for including me on your panel.
Thank you for joining us. This is quite a treat to have somebody from the beyond the border, as it were.
The other side of the wall.
Exactly.
Excited to join you.
Thank you. So, Donna, since you're the newest panelist, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what is in your cup?
I am a playwright in the U.S., as we mentioned. I'm originally from the land of the ice and snow in Chicago, and I'm currently living in Houston. In my Shakespeare cup from the Stratford Festival, I have a little bit of honey in my tea. Notice I mentioned the honey first.
It's the best way to do it. And
honey does deserve a place of honor.
It
does. I mean, I do honey in my cup of tea. I've gone away from the sugar and I've gone to the honey. And of course, last but certainly not least, we have our wonderful resident dramaturg, literary manager, my co-producer of All Things the Cup, Mr. Ryan Borochovitz. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Mac. Always a pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's always great having you. I cannot wait to hear your thoughts tonight about this particular production.
Well, you don't have
to. What's in your cup tonight?
I have tea with no honey, but it is in my The Cup. Hey, that's the show we're on right now. Mm-hmm. So meta.
And I also have my The Cup. Mm-hmm. And I'm drinking tea with honey.
You also left out, I need your cup.
We're working on it. Don't worry. Official theater merch here. We will be sure to get one to you in the future. All right. So why don't we dive into this? And right off the top, we're going to address Mr. Brian Dennehy, the late, great Brian Dennehy, in his portrayal of Sir Toby. So overall, because he was kind of the marketed front of the poster figure, even though Sir Toby is a supporting role of the show, what did we think of his portrayal of Sir Toby? Donna, I'll start with you tonight.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I'm going to totally fangirl because I absolutely adore Brian Dennehy. He is a unique presence in this piece. He's towering and larger than life, but there is that undercurrent of almost delicacy and a real human vulnerability. So I consider him a really open-hearted, salt of the earth performer, very much grounded to the world, but still with an everyman kind of relatability. And then with that commanding physical stature and powerful, almost leonine presence, this is a performer who fills the stage. Mm-hmm. And I'll fangirl on Stephen Ouimet too, because I absolutely love him too. Mm-hmm. And Dennehy, with this scene partner, sinks his choppers into Sir Toby's body carousing. And he really projects that kind of aging frat boy gone to seed vibe. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that when we first meet this unemployed knight, he's a bit tipsy and wobbly and his speech is slurred a little bit. But there's a very nuanced performance. There's a slyness and a playfulness to the role. He's a jovial bon vivant until he's not, when he unleashes all of his cruelty towards Malvolio. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something in his presence that suggests that somewhere in his history, Sir Toby was a gentleman. So I think it saves him from simply being a boorish drunk whose chaos everyone endures. There's a sweetness to his boor. Mm-hmm. And it also makes him a viable romantic partner for Maria and not simply a vehicle for social climbing. Mm. So I absolutely love him. You can't take your eyes off him.
Yes. Well said. I'll actually piggyback because you have very similar notes to mine, where my first note was physically he is such a powerful figure on the stage. Like he was this was over a decade ago now, so he was about 70 because he only passed away this year and he was about his mid-80s. So he was in his 70s when he did this. But yeah, even at that age, he still was physically one of the most biggest energy spaces on the stage. Like the minute he comes out golfing in that hysterical outfit they put him in, like it was like he just had that commanding presence. And I love how you brought up his teeth, because what's so great about these close-ups is he has beautiful, like almost Joe Biden-y teeth that are like those pearly white chompers, as you called them. And he was just so charismatic on stage when he flashed that pearly white smile. It's like you couldn't help but become endeared to him and kind of buy into his charm. And you can see why so many people like Mariah, like Sir Andrew, like Fabian, all kind of fall into his Brit gang, because you can tell he was one of these very charismatic people that can easily charm a lot of people into his hijinks. And I think that was just so great about him. But then he also could swing right into the really boorish comedy. Then sometimes he could play the classic drunk uncle that everybody kind of tolerates and says like one really witty thing at the dinner table. And it's like, all right, we'll tolerate you just for that. And you can kind of see why Olivia kind of keeps him around, where it's like, he's not a total jerk, where it's like, why does she have him in her house the whole time? But at the same time, you can see some of that tenderness she has towards him, where she kind of looks after him as like this part of the family, where it's like, I can see why she still has some family attachment, because Sir Toby can really easily come across as someone where it's like, why does Olivia keep this boorish drunk around her house? When it's like, I can see why now. I can see why this Sir Toby is being kept around Olivia's. I don't know if she lives in a palace or a state house, whatever it is. This place that she lives, I can see why Sir Toby's ended up staying there. And you're right, there's a sinister quality to him as well, where when he goes dark, and particularly in that scene in the kitchen at the end, where we've had this great raucous rock number, but then when him and Malvolio really start to go at it with each other, there is that other side to Sir Toby that comes out, and it's like, oh, you actually could be like back in your day, like back in your young heyday as a young knight, you could be a physical threat to people. Mm-hmm. Like there's that darker underbelly of who Sir Toby is, and we'll get more into the character of Sir Toby in a bit. But I just love Brian Dennehy in the show. I would have loved to have seen Brian Dennehy actually play Falstaff. Like that, I think that's a role that he would have nailed in a heartbeat.
Knocked it out of the park.
Yes. Yes. So good. So good. Graham, what are your thoughts on Mr. Brian Dennehy as Sir Toby? Because you saw him, like me, you saw him do it live on stage.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to see this production live back in 2011. And like, I remember like reviewing the recording made me remember what it was like sitting in the audience. And I even like saw more from it this time. And Brian Dennehy's performance was enormous. Like, it filled the space. In the festival theater, that's a big stage to fill. But he has this like physically like imposing presence. Like, he is a mountain of a man. Like, he doesn't look that tall, but he is. Like, he absolutely is enormous. And but he moves with surprising spryness for, you know, as you said, he was in his 70s when he was performing this. So like, age is just a number. And he had this kind of quality that he wasn't taking anything too seriously. And that's right in line with Sir Toby's character. I don't think that Sir Toby, even when he gets maliciously spiteful like he does towards Malvolio, it's kind of all in good fun. And he even sees like when he's been going too far. He's not one of these characters, and this is a comedy, who goes too far, causes irreparable harm, even though he does some pretty shady things in the play. It's all kind of done with this kind of camp humor that Shakespeare walks this line between comedy and tragedy with the whole Malvolio storyline. And that's kind of it's a weird sour note for such a jovial play as Twelfth Night, for the way Malvolio is treated by Sir Toby Maria, Sir Andrew, and Fabian, and Feste. Like, it's a very strange thing to find, a nugget to find in this very light, bright play. And I think one thing Brian Dennehy brings to the performance that makes this production really sing is that whole group brings a physicality to it. Because Twelfth Night, when you read the script, is pretty awful. I will say it's a pretty boring script to read through. But when you see it performed and you see the moments in these large chunks of text where there's added physicality around it to support it, it gets funny. You bring out that campiness, you kind of just revel in all the pleasure that Twelfth Night brings, the humor.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you 100%. The physicality of all of this group of clowns, technically is what they would be back in the day, is fantastic. Just because they come out right at the top, as we said, like Mariah and Sir Toby are golfing. Sir Andrew comes out in the golf cart. Even Fabian, when he shows up a little bit later on, even he has some great physical comedy, like in the spa with the towels and the fans. Like, each one of them all have great physical, especially in that Malvolio garden scene where they're skirting around the edge of the stage all the time, and just the way each of them kind of moves physically around that space, tiptoeing around, is fantastic. So Graham, brilliant line for pointing out that is the way they physically act on stage really did bring something special to what was going on there. Alicia, what are your thoughts on Brian Dennehy as Sir Toby?
I thought he did an amazing job. Honestly, I don't watch that much Shakespeare, but I've been reading a lot more Shakespeare lately, so I was really excited to watch Twelfth Night, and I thought he brought a youthfulness to his character, even though he's an older man. And I really loved the scene with him and Sir Andrew. It was nearing the end of the scene, right after Mariah left, near the beginning of the play, when they're dancing and doing these fun little dance moves. I watched it over so many times. I just thought it was really fun, and it's one of my favorite scenes of the play, because I feel like it just kind of I get a grasp of his character and how he's the drunk, funny guy, but also very witty and quick on his feet. And yeah, I think Brian Dennehy did an amazing, phenomenal job. I haven't seen him in I haven't seen much Shakespeare and many plays at Stratford. I was really I was stunned in the best of ways, and I think it was an amazing introduction to his work as well. So I enjoyed it. I think he did an amazing job, and he made everything seem so seamless and fun. So that's always good.
Love that. Well said. Ryan, what are your thoughts on?
I don't even know how much more there is to add at this point. I concur with all of you that he is amazing. All eyes are drawn to him every moment he's on stage. He brings many just great nuances to the performance. One moment that in particular that really stood out to me, it was during the scene in the kitchen, and it was when, I don't remember which song it was, but it was the first song that Feste begun to sing in that moment.
Oh, Mistress Mine.
Yeah, the Mistress Mine, thank you. And yeah, it was so raucous in the lead up to the song, and then when Feste begins to play, everything just mellows out. And this was certainly helped by the framing of the pro shot, but the camera really just lingered on Dennehy for just like an extra moment longer than you think. And yeah, his face was just so mellow, and he was so swept up by the beauty of the song in that moment. And I think that was such a great demonstration of the layers of that he was bringing to this character, that he isn't just a bore, he's not just a rogue or a rapscallion in any way. He's really you need an actor of this skill and talent to really find those nuances that he did extraordinarily. I was actually a little surprised upon hearing that he was playing Sir Andrew in this, because to me that never felt like a very big role. It's one to justify.
You mean Sir Toby?
Oh, sorry, Sir Toby. My apologies. Yes, thank you for correcting. Yeah, Sir Toby. But in general, oh yes, thank you. Yeah, like this whole B plot in general, like, you know, any one of them, like, it feels so secondary to the main thing that the story is about, that to get a star performer like Brian Dennehy, Graham, do you want to correct me that it's not in fact the B plot?
No, I just wanted to add that I agree, it is a B plot to this story. The main thing is Orsino and Olivia and that whole courtship, but they make it seem like it's the A plot. Like,
yes,
like
that's
the
where I was
amount of
going with
emphasis,
this.
like, yeah, sorry.
No, yeah, of course. I think, but yeah, getting someone like him commanding this role really made the two plots feel certainly on equal footing, and maybe even tip the scales in favor of this A plot. Agreed. Or this B plot, making it feel more like an A plot, which, yeah, I'm not complaining because it was all very well done. But yeah, it just almost, in a way, they made the most of having that smaller plot, but it just, to me, I would have liked to see more of him on stage. He's probably on stage less than 50% of the time. And after our last encounter with him on the Cup was in Death of the Salesman, where he's on stage as Willy Loman from pretty much beginning to end and really gets to command the whole stage in that performance. It was almost disappointing when he wasn't on stage here.
I will say, after having watched this production's always stuck with me. Where now I cannot see, like, the Sir Toby plot has become such an A plot in my mind that going back and rereading the script, I'm reading it and going, wait a minute, hold on. When you read the script, it really does feel like the B plot. But what Des has done is he made, I almost want to say, the more interesting plot that I think has more to say. The A plot, like the Sir Toby Malvolio discussion about class and society and just kind of what's going on there. Like, it actually has a lot of depth to it, and I think and it's really easy to make the lovers the A plot. But I think you can I think this is a play that, if done right, like Des has done here, you can actually make that Malvolio Sir Toby plot actually elevate. And Des was very keen on that when you watch his creative concept discussion on the Stratfest Home, which is, I should have said, which is where we watched this production as this new platform, and where there's a lot of great content on there. So look it up, Stratfest Home. But they talk about how Des was really interested about the politics of this Illyria, and kind of like how, because Orsino's kind of become obsessed with Olivia, he's kind of neglected everything else in the kingdom. So that's why you have kind of that broken, dirty mirror. Everything else has kind of become clouded and unclear. And within that, he goes, when things happen like that in politics, all these other festering side plots actually kind of gain more power because there's nobody in there correcting them. Like, Olivia's obsessed with her grieving and her love stuff. So she's like, oh, Sir Toby, you deal with Malvolio. I'm not going to deal with him. And she ultimately ends up putting Malvolio in the hands of his enemy. And it's that whole thing of, that's what happens when politics it kind of becomes clouded, that all these little side things can become bigger problems. So And that's really what happened in this. So I thought such a great way they did it. And I think that's why you need somebody like Brian Dennehy to come in and do that scale tipping, because if you just had somebody like, I don't know, not to be mean to like Tom McManus, who I'm sure would be a wonderful Sir Toby, but I don't know if you'd have the same pull as a Brian Dennehy would, like to pull that plot up into the forefront like they did here. Love you, Tom McManus, but I think there's a different pull that he would have to the characters. So there we go. Ryan, I'm going to let you start the next question since you ended our last question of what was the other character that you felt was best performed?
Okay, I'm sorry if I'm stealing everyone else's right now, but it was Ben Carlson as Feste.
You did not steal mine. So there you go.
Just
You stole one of mine.
that singing voice. I was not prepared for that. Like we've seen him act in many of these productions, and yeah, he's a great actor. I loved his Apomantus in Timon of Athens. But yeah, I was not. I thought I was actually not sold on him right away in this because I didn't think he was clowny enough for Feste at first. And he kind of he seemed almost like he was playing the Apomantus role, or a less Welsh version of the priest that he played in Merry Wives, whose name is escaping me at the moment. Parson.
No, it's not. It's a Parson Hugh.
Parson Hugh, yes, thank you. I know he's very talented and he is often very funny, but this almost felt like a more subdued comic performance. Mm-hmm. And then he started singing, and I was like, okay, well, this is what we've been saving kind of all of this shock factor for, because those pipes kind of blew me away. And I know we will talk more about the music in this production as we go on, so I don't want to blow the load here. But I think he really, next to Dennehy and next to so many talented people in this production, it is his musical prowess that really does make this show.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Carlson's playing it very much almost like the straight man in this comedy, where everybody else is kind of ricocheting off him, and he's kind of giving these wonderful side comments that the audience is picking up on. And I have to say, this is my favorite Ben Carlson performance that has always stuck with me over the years, is his wonderful portrayal of Feste. Because I mean, his Apomantus, for example, in Timon of Athens, almost felt like a regurgitation of Feste, to the point where I'm like, did they almost use the same wig on this guy? Like, did they go dig out the Feste wig and
his wig here was very Beethoven. He looks like that one painting of Beethoven that we've probably all seen.
Agreed. That is a total good description of that wig. And I mean, he is a wonderful singer. I mean, he played Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music a few years after this production was done. He's actually done a few musicals there, and he actually has a beautiful, beautiful voice, which we will definitely get into more. Alicia, who is your other outstanding performance you want to call
out? So yes, Ryan did take the Ben Carlson guy I was going to mention, but I wrote down two. So yes, Ben Carlson did an amazing job, and I thought I didn't feel like I was watching a Shakespeare performance. I just thought I was just watching, like, the way he used the language, it felt so natural and so modern that I couldn't help but be intrigued with everything he had to say. And he has this natural sense of humor that was it was almost kind of dry, kind of like Mackenzie was saying, like the straight sense of humor. It worked. I think he did it really, really well. Every time he spoke, I was so pulled in. I also really liked Michael Blake, who played Antonio. And I think it was because when Antonio came into play, when he came to get his money back from Sebastian, who's actually Viola, there was a turn in the play. There was a moment when everyone was like, wait a minute, why is Sebastian acting this way? It just, there was a hauntingness that just creeped over. And I think Michael Blake did such a great job at accusing and basically cornering Viola and making her look like she was in the wrong when obviously they didn't know that the twin was still alive, yada, yada, yada. But I really liked his performance. I thought it was really cool. I was intrigued. And I think it's a comedy, but I felt like things got really serious when he started to speak, but in a good way.
Yes.
I think his intensity was really well done.
Yeah, Michael Blake. I mean, he's cropped up since like I want to say almost from our very first episode.
Yeah, he was Albany in Lear. He was Cominius in Coriolanus. He was Caliban in The Tempest. He was Macduff in Mackers. Yeah, and then he did Othello just last year. Yeah,
that was amazing. Fantastic.
Like, he's a wonderful actor, and particularly with Antonio, which could be a really thankless role of this play, where it's like, oh yeah, like the C plot with Antonio. Like nobody whenever there's a scene study, it's always like, let's do a Viola scene or let's do a Sir Toby scene. Nobody's like, I want to do an Antony scene. But it's like, you're right, like you felt for this Antony, he really was almost the heart of this piece, where like when he comes on, your heart just bled for this man. Where he's like, well, give me back my money. Like, what?
He's the sweetest pirate.
He is the sweetest pirate. And that's the thing, you forget that he's a pirate until at the very end when they bring him into our scene, and it's like, oh yeah, like you took this guy's hand, he robbed your ship. It's like, oh, maybe he's actually not such a nice guy, but like we've only ever seen him from this one particular angle. So maybe so yeah, Michael Blake as Antonio, a wonderful performance there. Donna, who was your other shout out that you'd like to give?
I just want to say, first of all, that this was just a stunning ensemble in a really well orchestrated piece. And I was impressed with the performances as a whole. But I really love Stephen Ouimet. He's the hapless dolt, Sir Andrew, a rubber-faced and loose-limb actor with that impeccable comic timing. So he's the one who gets all those great crowd-pleasing, physically comic moments. Enters on a golf cart, he moonwalks, he vomits in the sink.
Flashes his butt.
I was adored once.
I know. That line, pang to the heart. He is nuanced enough to really make me feel that pang to the heart when he said, I was adored once. I couldn't laugh. So great performance also.
Yes. I also had Stephen Ouimet as my secondary shout out because he was such a great foil to Brian Sir Toby. Like the way Des found those two, like they just totally meshed up wonderfully. Like, and we've seen Stephen Ouimet do this before. Like he was the fool in Lear as well. He also was with Tom Rooney again in Coriolanus, where he was playing the other senator of the two senators. Yes, that one. Like he's just such, and he also was
Trinculo in the
Trinculo,
Tempest,
that's right.
Another clownish character.
Yes, but like this, like I remember when I found out that Stephen Ouimet was going to play Trinculo, I was expecting more of this Stephen Ouimet, not realizing that's almost been a decade between this performance and his Tempest performance. So obviously he's aged a bit, but like this wonderful wiry, like Donna, you said it perfectly, rubber-faced Sir Andrew that had that. Also, I have to give a shout out to that wig he wore. That was such a great character wig that just added so much to like it just elongated his face further, and he was so sympathetic. Like
he really was.
Like that was so great. Is that never in the piece did you ever feel like kind of like Sir Toby, where it's like, yeah, you're kind of doing some really bad things. Like this Sir Andrew is almost like kind of like Dopey from Snow White, where it's like that lovable kind of side character.
Yeah, he's just along for the ride.
Exactly, he's along for the ride.
Like go ahead.
Yeah, and that's exactly, and you feel his pain and vulnerability, where he is someone who basically wears his heart on his sleeve throughout the whole piece. Like he is visually hurt by seeing that he's being continually rejected by Olivia. And he's like, well, why do I keep doing this to myself? But then he's not quite bright enough to figure out that, oh, I'm only being kept around for Sir Toby's financial benefit. And when he comes out at the end and with the bloody head, and even Olivia kind of goes, well, look to him, and shows him that bit of sympathy. Like your heart just melts for the guy because he's been kind of really the entire show. And it's so great. Like the minute he comes on stage in that golf cart, that very first time, and the exuberance he has of driving the golf cart, you can just see that big Cheshire cat smile he can put out on his face. It's wonderful. I also want to give a shout out to Tom Rooney's Malvolio, because once again, that can be another really tough role to walk, where it can stray from serious to comedy and then stay in the realm of comedy, particularly when you're watching with the cross-gartered yellow stocking sequence, like, which was hysterical, but at the same time there was always that underlying pain of you're watching someone get picked on and they don't realize they're getting picked on. And that's a really tough line to walk, because that's, you can just stray into the realm of physical comedy and you totally miss the underlying, I don't know, Ryan, I don't know the right word is pathos. Sure, we'll go pathos. Pathos of what's happening to him, where he is like he is so happy with this situation he thinks he's in, that, and we're all laughing at him, but at the same time as you're laughing, you've had that pit in your stomach being like, oh, am I kind of being a bit of a bully in this moment to him because of what's happening? And you laugh at him when he's in the straitjacket in the clear box and he's having his scenes with Feste, where he's playing the pastor and everything, and they're just kind of mocking him, and it's funny, but at the same time he got that undercurrent of pain that comes with that character that can oftentimes be lost, because you either can play him really straight at the beginning to the point where you really don't like him and you want to see him get his comeuppance, and then by the time you get to the end you're like, okay, I've laughed at him, and you don't feel that pain until the very end when he goes, I'll be revenged on the pack of you. And it was one of these great lines that now I want to see the sequel of what happens to Malvolio. It's one of these great lost sequels that I would have loved to have seen, like a 13th Night, which is all about Malvolio getting his revenge on the pack.
There exists a contemporary play called Malvolio's Revenge by what's the author's name? Duncan Flaster, I want to say.
Oh.
Yeah, it's you can read it on New Play Exchange if you are a member. Like, yeah, it's
I want to read that. So yes, Stephen Olmette and Tom Rooney as Sir Andrew and Malvolio. Graham, who was your shout out?
Okay, so everyone has taken like all the ones that I was going to talk about, except one. Mariah, Kara Ricketts. Mariah.
Yeah,
she has the presence to foil both Sir Andrew and Sir Toby and be kind of like the smartest mastermind of all of them. But I think she also, like, she was just very playful about how she did it. She didn't give this essence of like, I know everything and I'm the best. She was kind of just also along for the ride, but also kind of had serious moments as well. But really, like, Mariah knows that she can get whatever she wants when she wants it. And I just think that her delivery is a lot like Ben Carlson's. Like, she makes Shakespeare very accessible, very like, you can understand when she talks. Like, she is talking pretty much like I am talking right now. Like, you can understand every word. It's very clear. It's very crisp. And she's able to let the flow inform you about the meaning, which I think is something that Stratford as a whole does really well, making Shakespeare a little more understandable. Like, if you're watching a Stratford Shakespeare productions, there is a flavor about how they do it. And personally, I think it's a really great trend that goes through, because a lot of people in school have been like, hey, Graham, you understand Shakespeare. Can you translate this into English for me? I'm like, well, it's already there, so I can't, but I can help you to understand it. Here's this book. It's called a lexicon. Use it. Not necessarily.
You were that friend in school.
I was that friend in school, and I was like, if you damage my lexicon, you're buying me a new one. But also, I want to give a shout out to Mike Shera, because Duke Orsino does not get a lot of love in this show, because really he's there only to set up the more important plot, which, let's be real, is Sir Toby, Sir Andrew, Mariah, and Malvolio. Like,
clearly, like none of the other lovers have gotten a shout out.
Like, honestly, Orsino can be tough because he's not in a lot of scenes. He's probably on stage about as equal amount of time as Sir Toby. And especially in the scene after Come Away Death, he drops some serious misogynistic bombs, which is really hard to play convincingly. Like as a performer, it's hard to sometimes look at a role that has beliefs that are completely contrary to what the actor may believe or not. Like, I'm not going to comment on what Mike Shera believes, but it can be really hard to portray that convincingly, especially because for a Canadian theater audience, the demographic generally does not believe things like women don't love as fiercely as men do, or like some baloney like that. So I think that Mike Shera being able to present that argument convincingly, he kind of like threw the ball up for Andrea Rung to just like smash it down as like, no, you're
literally
wrong. Why? Like, he set up that monologue so flawlessly, so that line that Cesario has, Viola has, really lands, because you've suddenly brought this very contrary experience forward, and as soon as you have a strong opinion, then you bring that equally strong opinion to comedic, and suddenly it almost like conquers it, like with the momentum of that scene. So I think that scene alone is enough to get Mike Shera a huge shout out.
Agreed. Yeah. Duker seems to be a very very thankless part, where it's like, oh crap, with this bonehead again, who's really just there lulling away in his pillows.
But he's also the perfect actor for it, because he is a goofy guy. He has like his kind of Kermit the Froggy voice that is just persists in most of the roles. Like, it's just what he sounds like, except when he played Cornwall in Lear, and he was genuinely terrifying.
Yes.
But he reminds me of Barone, like in Love's Labours, which he also played excellently.
Fantastic Barone. And there's also like this production brought in a lot of queer elements, and that's something I look for. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
We will.
There is this queer association between Cesario and Orsino that I did pick up on seriously, and anyone who has been in love while in the closet can attest to what Viola is experiencing when you're with this person every day. They may trust you, you may be best friends, and you just cannot tell them your secret. So that also resonated loud. But I will talk a lot about that later, so we'll stop that.
Love that. All right, well, let's get into what was our favorite production or design element.
We all want to say the same one on 3.
1, 2, 3.
The music.
The set.
Do tell, Graham. You go first.
Yes.
Okay, so when you first walk into the festival stage, or when the camera first shows the stage, it is this enormous arch that just is imposing, and it's right there, and there's this shattered mirror in the middle, and it's kind of jumping out at the audience. A sense that you are going to be kind of going through the looking glass, because Illyria is this magical realm where anything is possible, and women dress as men, and men get married after meeting a woman, and like there are pirates, and there are knights pulling tricks, and there's sword fights, and there's misunderstandings, and there's drunkenness, and there's cross-gartered yellow stockings. Like, there is so much going on in Illyria. It is kind of like a funhouse mirror of all these like things, like the knight, the butler, all these like the a gentlewoman in waiting. Like, all these roles are things that we associate with the period piece, but they all get distorted through this like Des McAnuff lens. And I think it is like the set absolutely represents it. There is one thing I'm a little discontented with about the set, and that was the
mini fridge.
Actually, no. I kind of like, that's weird. Okay, it's weird that they had the fridge as the chandelier, but actually what I wanted to say was the storm at the beginning, where they had this little sculpture of a ship that got illuminated by lights. I'm like, okay, in the Christopher Plummer Tempest, you were able to create a veritable storm on stage in Act 1, Scene 1. And with them shouting and wind and like curtains flying everywhere, and I actually felt like I was on a ship being tossed about. And so for this production, for them to just do a little bit of strobe light or fast flicker of a light on a little opaque sculpture,
keep in mind it was just 1 year after the Tempest. They maybe didn't want to replay all the same greatest hits. Des directed both of them.
I mean, I get that, and I get that the storm isn't really the focal point of the start of the show, but I don't like that as a storm. I think it could have been done. That little aspect could have been done more to kind of set us off as like, for lack of a better metaphor, the bullet firing to like launch us into Act 1. You could have had a more striking image than just of light. But all in all, the set, the world that was created by Deborah Hanson was absolutely wonderful. So magical. It's the kind that I want to go and live in. The textures were so rich, and the lighting also really just illuminated it well with this kind of dreamy quality. Anyways, that's it.
I mean, I have to agree with you about the set too. I mean, the set is gorgeous. I remember seeing this opening night and just walking into the theater because we got lucky with our seats that were kind of the center orchestra of that section, like right in front of the lighting booth that's down in there. If you don't know the festival stage, but like just walking in and just the size of that mirror, because you don't realize how tall that theater is, the height that you'd have to get to fill that space with that giant mirror. But it's gorgeous, like just the amount of work that went into that set.
Also,
like,
something you don't really see in the recording, but if you were to look, I was in the balcony for this show, and if you were looking down on the stage, they had two faces printed on the stage.
Oh,
were from the Arden Shakespeare edition of Twelfth Night. They took the picture from the front of that, which is the Viola and Sebastian twins. So you can kind of see it in a couple scenes, but there is this imprint on the stage of these two faces. So it's like attention to detail is the name of the game with this set, and they knocked it out of the park.
Wonderful. Donna, so I think you said music as well when we all said at the beginning, or is there something else you wanted to bring up?
I absolutely love the music, but I did want to bring up, and going along with the design, it was fun to kind of search for the Easter eggs that connected the eclectic costumes and the eclectic music. We already mentioned that Feste kind of resembles Beethoven. Well, he also has like a touch of Eddie Vedder, and he's costumed as a Haight-Ashbury San Francisco hippie. And Fabian was reminiscent of a bow-tied, slim-suited Buddy Holly with his eyeglasses also. And then John Lennon at the piano in his granny glasses.
And he's also Ringo, the pizza guy.
And the pizza delivery guy. And then just watching the various musicians, I thought, okay, well, that guy looks like Jimi Hendrix. And here's the Sgt. Pepper era Beatles. And I even saw Clarence Clemens with the sax. And Stephen Russell's first officer resembled Elvis Costello. So that I was just really fascinated with the layers of references, musical references.
Love that. Yeah, costumes were done by, I guess it's also Deborah Hanson, because it doesn't say one particular person. So yeah, Deborah Hanson would have done set and costume. And she did a phenomenal job with weaving in, because Des loves his music. So the fact they were able to weave in all this, as you said, musical Easter eggs for people who would catch those. Like, I caught the Beatles reference right away, but all the other little ones you brought up, I was like, I didn't even catch that. But that is such a great thing they did with those costumes, and just the detail that went into all the patterning and jewel making. We talked a little bit about this when we did Antony Cleopatra and Cleopatra's costumes for that. But like in this one, just watching like the back design on some of those outfits and the layers of those costumes were just absolutely stunning. Once again, Stratford's production design is wonderful. Like when they go for it, they go for it. I mean, some productions we see they don't fully go for it, but this one they totally just bought it hook, line, and sinker. Alicia, what's your pick?
My favorite production element, I liked the specifics of the set, and I remember there was a moment when Mariah was turning on the tap in the kitchen, and I remember just seeing that and thinking like, wow, running water on stage, and like I really liked that. The bath, it wasn't a bathtub, the boat
spa?
at
the
no
boat.
The boat at the very beginning of the play. It looked like a bathtub, but it wasn't. It was a boat. And I loved just seeing it glide across the stage. I think I liked all the moving, almost like the moving pictures that the show created. So the ship gliding across the stage at the very beginning, that was so pretty for me. The water, which is moving because it was moving through the tap. And then I have an image of Feste on top of Malvolio's like jail cell box thing. And he was playing the guitar, and then it's the box started to go underneath the stage and closed up, and I was like, that's so cool. So I think I really enjoyed the movement of how the set moved, the images that were created, and I think this production did a really great job of that, and Stratford in general is great for that. And I think out of everything, it's just that running water just really made me so happy for some strange reason. So that's my take.
Water, that's been like a theme these last few reviews we've done. We talked about it in Red, talked about it in Indecent, and now it's come back again in 12th Night. Like, Ryan, you and this running water, you seem to be like...
I didn't bring it up. Well, I like running water. It was Ed who didn't like it.
That's right.
I was the one who complimented the rain in Indecent. But if I can piggyback off of you, Alicia, there. Well, first of all, I will say the music was my number one pick, and it's, I cannot stress that enough. But because I did get to go first and say Ben Carlson as my pick for actor, I won't focus on the music in this production element here. But I was going to say something similar to you, Alicia, about just these various stage images, and you touched on a lot of the ones I would have brought up, but one that you actually didn't mention that was my favorite was the baseball and the batting, because and what was so great about that one is it's very simple. It's just a well-timed swing with a sound effect. But when Viola missed, and the little curtain in the cage, they have a stagehand back there just like pulling it up ever so slightly. It's such a simple detail that just really brings the whole thing together and sells that illusion. And then of course when she finally hits one and then they all look in the same direction and you hear the smash sound, is just like little details like that are just so nice. So I will add that to your otherwise great list, Alicia.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like we all were going to talk about the music and then none of us talked about the music. So I will go into the music then, because that was my first thing, because it stuck with me ever since I saw it on opening night. I mean, Graham was lucky he bought the album. I did not buy the album, so I'll have to snake that off when he comes to Toronto at some point. But I love the music of this. Like, this is literally on that line between like musical and play. Where, like, if you add in like a few more songs, like turn one of Viola's big speeches into a musical number, you could have a musical on your hands. Like, this is such a close line that the amount of music they infused, because they didn't just do the songs that were in the script, they actually brought back musical motifs throughout. Like the whole motif of "If music be the love, play on," like that whole musical line just kept coming back throughout, and like. In fact, you open Act 2 with this big raucous musical number with the women and also the men. And you have my favorite, which is Hold Thy Peace, which is the kitchen song. That is the Beach Boys tribute number. That apparently is also Brian Dennehy's daughter's favorite clip of her dad performing, because she goes, how much fun. You can clearly see him doing this big comedy song number. Because she goes, he always played the heavies on stage. Like, he never got to have fun with the comedies. The fact he got to do a Beach Boys number with a pot in a ladle, and they're just having so much fun with all this music and the underscore of it as well. It's just it's very reminiscent of one we talked about with Pericles, where that also had a lot of music infused, and it just lifts the story and moves it, and it makes it so much more accessible. And that's one of the things we talked about when we did our musical roundtable a few weeks ago, about how music just really makes things accessible for audiences who may not always get what's going on, but the music is so thematically tied to the story that even if you didn't get what was being said lyrically, the music still informed you of the emotional undertow that was happening with the scene. Like in the scene with Feste, Orsino, and Viola, where like you can see the seeds of romance between Orsino and Viola starting to come together when Feste is singing that beautiful song with the guitar to them. And they just are slowly leaning into each other at the end, and your heart just kind of goes, ah, and melts. So it's beautiful. Like Des McAnuff and Michael Roth did a great job with the music of this piece. And the other thing I was going to say, because in case somebody didn't bring up music, or in case everybody else did bring up music and we needed something else, I did note of Des's direction of a scene where he animated the scene. He always found, I don't want to say bits, but it's like he found ways just to animate the scene. So it wasn't just a parking and barking Shakespeare tune on, which sometimes Stratford does fall into, where the actors are just like on stage reciting a monologue because it's time to do that monologue. But here, like whether it was baseball, tennis, golf, just having fun making toast in the kitchen or buying a pizza, or whatever it is, like Des was a great job at finding business for the stage that just animated that scene and made this piece alive in a way that it felt like a real lived-in world. It didn't feel like you were watching a play. You felt you were actually just a fly on the wall of these different courts watching these scenes take place. There was just that little bit extra that came into the scene when you give proper business, because sometimes doing this type of business direction can come across as really fake and like, oh, he's making toast because there's nothing else for him to do. There's no intention behind what's going on. But everything that was done had that undercurrent of, it's clearly being thought out of like why they're playing golf versus say playing tennis in one scene. Like why there are certain things that are going on. Clearly Des has worked and figured out what action is best for that scene. Like just the kitchen stuff with the running water, the toaster, the pizza, all those little landmark action beats of the scene that kind of just keep the scene moving and lively, kept this whole piece alive. Like I remember sitting in the audience and never getting bored watching this Shakespeare. And sometimes Shakespeare can come really dry, especially when you're a teenager and you've been in rehearsal all day rehearsing a Shakespeare play, and now you have to sit through a 3-hour Shakespeare production at night and you're tired, and yet right right, but then this I remember it just, the energy that came through that production, every scene, there was not a boring moment in my opinion. This play just had a life and a movement to it that was just phenomenal, that I think can be really lacking sometimes in the Shakespeare production. So there we go. All right, so let's see, is there an area of this production that you think could be improved? Alicia, I'll let you start this one.
Okay. Okay, so I honestly think there was a little too much music. But before I continue, I want to quickly ask, because I remember reading Twelfth Night a while ago, but I can't remember if there is that much music in it initially, or did Stratford or did the director add that in?
For a lot of it, it is present. I know that Come Away Death is from the original script. Oh Mistress Mine is from the original script.
Okay.
I think Hey Robin, Hold Thy Peace, and
Wind in the Rain.
To the Devil and Wind in the Rain. So most of the songs are there. If Music Be the Food of Love, that recurring theme, that was just a musicalization of the famous Orsino line. As well as the passionate shepherd to his lover, that raucous beginning of Act 2, that honestly is like one of the best beginnings of Act 2 I've ever seen. That was actually not even Shakespearean poems. One of them was a Sir Walter Raleigh poem, and I don't know who penned the other one, but they were response poems. So the first verse, where the shepherd is singing to his lover, the men's verse is the one poem, and then the women sing the response poem. So these are actually two period pieces, like from like Shakespeare's general temporal era, but they were not originally in Twelfth Night.
Okay, thank you. That was really helpful.
Well said, Greg.
Yes, very well said. Okay, now that I know that most of the songs, for the most part, were of Shakespeare's time, and it makes sense. I don't know if I can constructively dislike the music as a aspect of the production. I don't want to say I didn't like Shakespeare's writing in that sense, because I don't think that's productive. But so I did have another thing that kind of took me out of it a bit. And I think it was the toaster. For some reason, seeing the toaster in a Shakespeare
Running water
play
is fine. The toaster is where you draw the line.
This production needs to be gluten free.
We have our
I think, yeah, it was the scene with the toaster, and then there was the pizza that was delivered to the house. And then I just started to think, like, I understand that this is not set in Shakespeare, like the actual setting is not in Shakespearean's time. But for some reason, the toaster, I just felt like it took me out. It took me out of it. I don't know why. And yes, this is something that's super specific, and they can take the toaster out of the production and the play would still go on and it would still be perfect. But to be honest, I couldn't find much to dislike or much about the production to change. So I think I was picking at straws. And yes, my personal preference is I thought there was too much music, but that's okay. Like, the music was, at the same time, it was fun, but part of me was thinking, okay, this can wrap up now. I thought that the songs were a bit too long. So my answers in general are, I thought the songs were slightly too long, I guess. Maybe it could have been shortened, because it felt like it was going into musical territory. Mm-hmm. Nothing's wrong with musicals, but I wasn't feeling the musical vibe, I don't think. Does that make sense?
Yes,
I hope that
it does. And I will piggyback off you shortly, but Graham, you want to go first?
Yeah, Graham's got his hand up.
Yeah,
I think I'm done.
I'll just quickly piggyback. I agree with the toaster. Even though it was a nice little gag to kind of interrupt Malvolio and kind of keep the scene going, it did take me out of the play a little bit because I was too busy worrying about how did they do that? Did they actually put toast down and then just have to time the scene out so it would pop up? Or was that the stage manager calling it? Or like, so I took time to get out of the play and think about how
the
they
mechanics of toasting.
And this is because I'm a psycho theater major, but you know.
Keep in mind, I will note the bread was very raw when it popped, so it's clearly not even plugged in the toaster.
Yeah, so it just, I'll agree with you.
These are the things I notice.
And I agree also that Twelfth Night was one of their musicals this year, along with JCS and Camelot. Like they usually do like 2 or 3 musicals per season, and this was one of their musical offerings this season. It kind of doubled Shakespeare musical duty. But I don't think there was enough music to make it a musical. It was a play with music.
Yes.
And I agree with you. A lot of the songs, I'm just like, all right, this can wrap up now. Especially "Oh Mistress Mine." I was like, "Come Away Deaf." Like, I can listen to that song on repeat. I love that song. But "Oh Mistress Mine," I'm like, get on with it. I'm here for Hold Thy Peace. That's why I'm in this kitchen. Let's love a good life, okay? Like let's do it. Anyways, I'll let Ryan.
Okay, well, so this is the part where I'm gonna sound like I'm contradicting myself, but I'm not, because after I just praised the music so much, I see where both of you are coming from in this kind of critique of the music going on too long, and that it's not a musical per se. But I think I've isolated for me what I found to be particularly irksome was the non-diegetic music in particular. So I didn't feel like any of the songs that are like in the text, and even the one song they added, like that was actually just in the world of the play. They are performing music for each other and having a good time. That was all fine for me, and I was bobbing my head and jamming to it. And like I would pay money just to see Ben Carlson start a band with all these people and just tour outside of the context of Twelfth Night songs written with lyrics by Shakespeare or Walter Raleigh for that matter. But yeah, like I was into the songs as they served the play. The thing that I really didn't like, or I thought it was clever the first time and then they did it in every single scene, is when the music begins to swell in the back. And it sounds like the characters are going to burst into songs about their emotions, a la actual musical, like theater. And then they didn't. Every single time, maybe every so often they would kind of have like a lyrical lilt on one of their lines, and occasionally there was the repetition of "If music be the fruit of love, play on" as a song. But it felt like, I am personally, like, I'm not against making a musical version of Twelfth Night that actually does just like have them burst into songs singing their Shakespearean soliloquy. It's that idea, that the oft-quoted thing about musicals, that when your emotions are so strong that you can't speak anymore, you have to start singing, and then when you can no longer sing, you have to dance. And I would have been here for that, but it was just the constant fake out of, it sounds like we're going to do that or we're not. It's like, okay, who's seen Monty Python, The Holy Grail?
Yes.
So yeah, you might remember a scene in the Tale of Sir Lancelot segment with the prince. He's like, well, I don't want to marry her. I just want to sing. And the music is like, no, none of that. And that's what it felt like in every single scene of this play. So it is the non-diegetic music that I'm taking issue with here. It's the constant playing of musical motifs and repetitions, even outside of the context of this bobbin jukebox concert we have going on in the rest of the play that I adored on every level. So that was the one kind of tiresome point of contention from me, as much as I love the music in general.
Wonderful. Graham, I just want to make sure, did you have anything else you wanted to add to yours? Because I know you kind of were responding to Alicia's a note that she was giving. So is there anything else you want to add that's like separate?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
My only point of improvement is actually going to directly go against something you said, Mackenzie, is that I did not like a lot of the excess movement that was behind the scene. The one scene that sticks out in my mind is the Sebastian and Antonio scene, where there's all these people walking by in the rain in the background. Like all these, like, I'm like, okay, this is just really distracting. I need you guys to stop. Like that was really, I remember that live. I was like, okay, there's a little too much motion. I'm getting distracted from the scene that's happening. We don't need to have people crossing the festival stage to articulate what we're on a busy street.
Well, I think if I could, in slight defense of it, I agree that it was too much movement and not necessary, but I think there was a very deliberate use of that in one particular moment when Antonio was describing how it's not safe for him to walk the streets of Illyria because he has so many enemies there, and he kind of like looks over his shoulder and you see other people and you think, oh no, is this going to
and the one guy that does
brawl?
Cross the stage is the one that rats him out to the police later on. So
yeah,
which that was a setup.
So there is a function to it. I'm not saying that they wouldn't have been fine cutting it completely, and because it maybe was distracting, but I wouldn't say it was useless.
I get bothered because Shakespeare is such a world of poetry, and that's really how characters exist in Shakespeare. And yes, I know staging requires physicalization, but the poetry is why Iago's last line of Othello is so powerful. He says, "From this day forward, I will never speak again." I'm paraphrasing, but he's taking himself out of existence in this play. He's saying, "You guys can't touch me. I've accomplished what I wanted." Mic drop. And that's why that line is so powerful. So for these moments of movement to come into Shakespeare and kind of take away from the poetry, that's where I take issue with it. When too much is happening, like the kitchen scene, I love that there's blocking. I love that they're doing things and not just talking about stuff. But there were some places where I was thinking, Des, chill. This is not a full-blown musical number. You are not on Broadway. This is Shakespeare. Also, the song in the last scene when Sebastian and Viola are reunited was a little too sappy for my taste.
It's a sappy scene, though.
I don't think it was needed because I think that there's enough power between these two characters reuniting and kind of all things becoming peace again. That energy can carry that scene. You do not need to put strings to that. So those are my points of improvement, is that you can take a little bit of the musical out of this piece because Shakespeare is lyrical enough.
Fair enough. Donna, what do you think was the area that was the most need of improvement?
I'm kind of piggybacking on what everybody has said, but my response as a playwright, where I throw myself into the world of the play first, and then as a playwright, I ask myself, what about the length? The production feels a bit long, and I think it's because of the music. I'm always concerned as a playwright when I'm creating something. I'm always asking myself, well, how much can I ask of my audience? How much sitting can I ask? And contemporary audiences are usually comfortable with about 90 minutes or so. So maybe even in the 10-ish years since this play was produced, expectations have changed. So as much as I absolutely adored the music and felt that it authentically added to the world of the play and illuminated the storytelling, it also increased the running time. So the production just felt a little long to me.
Totally fair. I totally get it. Like, I remember sitting down to watch this last night, and I looked at the time, and I was like, this is over. This is almost 3 hours. I didn't think it was 3 hours.
So it's 2.5 on the Stratfest at home. With the intermission, it probably would have been close to 3 when you saw it live.
I remember thinking, wow, this actually is a longer production than I remember. Like, it kind of goes on a bit. So absolutely, I agree. For me, though, it's something we've actually alluded to already, but it's the way of the direction of this piece handled the plot lines, where the B plot, I know, Ryan, you said they kind of even like brought the B up into evening out with the A. Mm-hmm. I think the A almost kind of falls away to the point where like you're just waiting for the B plot to like begin again. It's like, okay, well, let's just get back to this Sir Toby Malvolio hijinks. Like, why am I sitting here listening to Viola do her monologue, and like I'm ready for Sir Toby to come back? And I think that's a detriment to this play, because the A plot is supposed to be the lovers. You're supposed to be really invested in the lover plot, and then kind of just having the sprinkling of the B plot is there to kind of give the audience that needed break from the A story. But the fact that a lot of the time it was, where's the B?
Yeah, I don't care about your willow cap, and just show me the funny guys.
Exactly. And I think
Breach.
Right? Like, I think, especially with the Duke Orsino scenes, for me, like, those kind of, like, the baseball one is my favorite of all the Duke Orsino scenes, but there's a lot of them where I'm like, okay, all right, we get it, let's get back to Malvolio, and Sir Toby, let's get to the cross garter, like letter scene, or the scene of him with stuck in the box, like, or the kitchen scene.
But Mackenzie, Orsino is so sad and so in love.
I don't care.
Like, don't you just want to stew in that suffering?
No, I've never been a fan of angst. That's why I don't like the musical Rent. Angst is not me. Angst is not me. So anytime I have to sit and listen to boring angst, I'm like, dear God, move on. And I think that's why I've always been drawn to the Malvolio Sir Toby plot. Even reading this play back in high school, I was always more interested in those scenes versus the lover scenes, because it's just like, oh, okay, it's another. Basically, it's almost like a repeat of Midsummer, where you got these 4 characters that are all kind of mismatched, and at the end they somehow magically all come together. Hooray!
Somehow,
fight me. I love Midsummer.
I love Midsummer too. Like, if I'm gonna go for a Shakespeare lover story, Midsummer all the way. That is a much better story. For this, like, the fact that you even like reference Midsummer, where Olivia does this is Midsummer Madness. I'm like, well, now I really just want to like go watch Midsummer. Good job, Shakespeare, plugging your other play. But it's like, yeah, I mean, I think that's the weakest part of this, is that the A plot, I don't want to say suffers because of how good Brian Dennehy and his whole plot line is, but it's really something where like you could have done a little bit more to help boost up, because you can see them trying, where like, even though the act 1 section ends with the letter scene, and then after that you have, for some reason, you have the twins crossing the stage looking at each other as if not seeing each other but looking out into space to kind of be like, remember, this is still the main plot, it's about this sibling story here, like, remember? It's not the other plot that you could have ended act 1 on. Like, in the fact that, like, they had to keep reminding you of this other plot, when it's like, why do I don't care about you? Move on. Get back to what I want to see. So, love it, but I do think the lovers needed a little bit more support of getting them kind of boosted up again, because the B plot was just so strong this time around.
And I think that's a bit of the problem of like star power in shows, is that because Brian Dennehy was there was this obligation. It's like, okay, guys, we got Brian Dennehy. We need to give Dennehy the chance to shine. And if that means like highlighting this plot at the expense of another, so be it.
But I think it's specifically a problem of star power in ensemble comedies, which this play definitely is. If Dennehy said, I really want to play Lear, that wouldn't be a problem because he would be an amazing Lear, and Lear commands the stage as the protagonist.
Yes, agreed. Actually, that would be a great scene, Brendan Dennehy as Lear. God, I miss Brian Dennehy already. All right, let's head into the last question, though. And Ryan, as our resident TA, I want you to kick this question off as always, which is, do you think this production hit its mark? Is it worth the watch? Would this end up on your syllabus, Ryan, as a production to show students?
Yeah, so yes, I very much enjoyed it, so it is worth the watch. It hit the mark. I've actually, as I was watching, I realized I've read Twelfth Night so many times, and I don't think I've ever actually seen it perform before. So I don't have necessarily a production in my playing simultaneously in my head to compare it to in terms of which one would I show to students. But I think this one is a good demonstration. It definitely has all these just very engaging aspects that I think would spark students' interest and get them excited about it. As much as I love the music, I think if I was doing it in an educational setting, it kind of maybe distracts a bit from, okay, remember we're studying the text here. But it is still an exciting entranceway in, and the play is just even the text is a celebration of music. That's why there are so many songs in it, and the very first line that in this production kept being repeated is testament to that. So I won't, I won't even say to students, fast forward through the songs if you're not enjoying them. If you are, then of course watch them. But yeah, I liked it. I encourage others to watch it and would certainly consider showing it to students.
Very good. Donna, what are your thoughts?
I think it absolutely hits its mark. It's Shakespeare with a house band. I think it's energetic and engaging, and it makes Shakespeare accessible to people who might not necessarily find him accessible. So I think it's great.
Wonderful. Graham, what are your thoughts?
Springboarding a little off of Ryan, I would definitely recommend this to any students or students of theater to watch what you can do with Shakespeare, because Shakespeare does not have to be a boring period piece of just people talking in highfalutin language, and it can be entertaining. It can have the value of a Broadway musical. It can be bright and fun and energetic, and also reading Twelfth Night is the worst. As I said, it's so much better when you see this play, especially of any Shakespeare comedy. This play is better performed because you get those elements of physical humor, like with Stephen Lee Mack as Sir Andrew, Brian Dennehy as Sir Toby, Mariah and Malvolio. Their physical aspect makes it funny. The lines themselves, not so funny, but when Mariah takes Sir Andrew's hand and just puts it on her chest, that moment was so awkward and so uncomfortable, but also there was this humor in it because it just created a sense of empathy with the characters, and you're well, okay, that happened. But you don't get any of that reading the script. No one knows unless you look up the language what the Buttery Bar pun means. And Shakespeare was a master of dirty puns. So many dirty puns. So did this production hit the mark? Absolutely. I don't think the music was so long that it was such a crippling downside that it's not worth it. But I also, if I were a TA, I'm not sure I would assign Twelfth Night as reading material.
But TAs don't get to choose that.
Well, I know, but if I were a prof, I would not assign Twelfth Night as reading material because it's just not the best literary piece. But also, I'm coming from an MFA program, so I'm looking specifically at playwriting and writing composition. So I would definitely aim people to other plays instead of Twelfth Night.
There we go. Alicia, what are your thoughts? Is this one you want to show to your friends?
Yeah, I think this play, it was so fun to watch. The acting was so well done. I was very, very happy to just sit and watch. I do agree with Donna with it running a bit long. And I think if possible, if they could just cut 10 minutes of it off somehow, That would be lovely. But overall, as it is already, I think it's a fun play to watch. And someone already mentioned, I think also again it was Donna, that the way it's done, you don't have to. It doesn't have to be a person who knows Shakespeare through and through to sit and watch that. I think they did a great way of making it accessible because the actors knew the language so well and the direction was done so well and the physicality to everything was done very well that like I was like, oh, I understand what's happening. Yes, I've read Twelfth Night and I'm familiar with Twelfth Night. And a lot of people relate Twelfth Night to the movie She's the Man. I'm surprised we haven't mentioned that already.
True, we haven't mentioned it.
So if you watch that, you're also a bit familiar. But anyways, it's a fun play. It's one of Shakespeare's comedies. I could sit back and giggle and laugh, and it left me with a peacefulness. I think, and I also think it was because of the music. The music I found it very peaceful.
Yeah, I mean, you've all basically covered all my points, so I'll be really brief. But yes, absolutely, it hit the mark. I mean, this is a great production to show people just to kind of get them interested in this play and in Shakespeare because it's so adaptable and just kind of it shows the versatility of Shakespeare. It's like, hey, yeah, like Shakespeare can't incorporate a Beach Boys song if you want. Like, there's that ability that it can morph and show Shakespeare's fun way that it actually can't be performed. It's not dry like sandpaper, like those 1970s BBC films that we had to watch in school that were like, dear God, like if you're trying to kill Shakespeare for students, that's the way to do it. That like this is such a great lively way of showing students. Like I wish they had showed this in my high school class. I'm sure a lot more of my fellow classmates who weren't big on Shakespeare would have totally gone into this more. Because once again, like this plot can come across as either really complex to people who don't get the whole gender reversal, love talk, but then at the same time it can also be a really simple plot for people that kind of get bored with it really quickly. But this just is such a lively, fun production that I just go, you could show this to anybody and they would be tapping the show. I mean, Donna, you said your husband was humming the tunes just from listening to you watch the movie. So I mean, like that just shows how infectious this particular production can be. And I think that's why so many people, when Stratford announced that they were going to be doing these streaming plays online, that people were like, well, when are you going to show 12th Night? Because a lot of people remember this production. That just shows how memorable this particular version of it was. I mean, I love Brent Carver, the late great Brent Carver, who did this play as his last play at the festival for his untimely passing this year. And he also played Festing. It's a very different production directed by Martha Henry. Nobody really talks about it, but yet everybody always remembers the Des McAnuff Beach Boys raucous music version of 12th Night. So clearly this has had an impact on many people, and I think that's a really great testament to how memorable this production is, that it kind of sticks with you all these years after. I mean, we're 11 years on and it still has that oomph to it. So there we go. All right, let's head into some more text-based questions, because you know we like to do. We like to talk about the production, and we like to dive into the text. So first off, we're going to do would you consider Mariah and Sir Toby the villains and or antagonists of this play? Alicia, we'll start with you on this one.
Alrighty. When I saw this question up for discussion, I honestly didn't know how to answer. Because that never even occurred to me. I didn't really see a villain in the show, but if I had to choose, I wrote down, yes, they could be the villains because they were causing mischief towards Malvolio's life. But then I kind of saw Malvolio as the villain, but I think it's just because he's grumpy. Like, I don't know if that makes him the villain. Is he a bad guy?
Malvolio's like Cogsworth. He's there to run the household. He is keeping the time, and everybody, like, we're in mourning. This is what we do. Like,
yeah,
basically, he is Mr. Carson from Downton Abbey. Like, that is, like, he is a straightforward, this is my business, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. And at first, when I watched the play, I was thinking, because Mariah and Sir Toby and Sir Andrew were trying to get Malvolio like they're trying to frame him, and they ended up succeeding. And I was wondering, like, oh, they're framing him because Malvolio got Sir Toby kicked out of the household. But then I realized that's not true, and they were just framing him just because they disliked him. And that kind of changed my perspective of it. And I just started to look at Mariah and Sir Toby like, but why? Yes, we dislike people, but we don't have to go through all that effort. So you know what? I think I do see them as like the goofy villains. They're not super evil, but yeah, if I had to pinpoint a villain, it would have to be them.
Donna, what are your thoughts?
I think they are the villains because they're the ones who unleash this anarchy and chaos. And they rope in Feste and Fabian with kind of a gleeful pack mentality. So Mariah's the one who hatches the scheme to humiliate this officious buzzkill Malvolio. And then they kind of take it to a frightening extreme, really. And Sir Toby is also manipulating and maneuvering Sir Andrew. He schleps him along. He crassly encourages him to accost and assail Mariah. He leads him to believe he has a chance with Olivia when he really doesn't. And then he damn near gets him killed with the duel. So it's like a different set of machinations and maneuverings going on.
Yeah, I absolutely agree 100% with you, Donna. Like I wrote, Sir Toby is absolutely the antagonist of this play, where he is literally provoking fights, robbing Sir Andrew, his horrible treatment of Malvolio. Like he is really driving. I wouldn't identify Mariah as a villain. I put her more in the accomplice, like Fabian category, where they kind of go along as like the bully's bystanders, kind of like the rest of the troupe that kind of follows and enables the bully. She is absolutely an enabler to Sir Toby, that she's kind of egging him on. So I wouldn't call her a villain. I'd call her more as the like kind of the the right hand of Sir Toby. But I would definitely call him the main villainous antagonist.
Even though she's the one who hatches the plot.
She hatches the plot, but it's Sir Toby who takes it to the next level. It's one thing to write the letter. Sir Toby is the one that continually instigates multiple problems throughout. Mariah does the one act of, I'm going to write the letter, but then it's Sir Toby that kind of rouses everybody to continue the ruse to the point. Like, Mariah never doesn't have the idea of locking him up, like Malvolio up in a box and calling him insane. Like, as far as she's concerned, she's going along with it, saying, let's get him dressed up and just like humiliate him because he humiliates her in the kitchen scene when he comes in and kind of chastises her. That's her level of, I want my vengeance, just to kind of get you back for chastising me, because proving that anybody can fall victim to this type of situations. Even though like there really is no good reason for him to chastise Mariah in that scene. Like it's not like she's out there partying with them. She's just kind of in the room, and Malvolio's like, "What were you doing? Like, why aren't you doing your job?" So, and I would definitely call her more of a kind of like one step down from the antagonist. She's kind of there, but she's not fully as manipulative and villainous, not even villainous, antagonistic as Sir Toby is, where Sir Toby has a lot more dark elements to his character. Like I said, he's provoking fights. Like Donna said, he's robbing Sir Andrew. Like, he's doing a lot more heinous acts that make him clearly a much more bigger antagonist than Mariah would be. Mariah kind of disappears after the letter scene. She doesn't really show up like in the like main Malvolio plot. She kind of shows up briefly, but she's not really as integral to it as Sir Toby becomes. He kind of overtakes her in that plot line. But yeah. Well, I guess, Ryan, because you already were chiming in, what are your thoughts on Sir Toby and Mariah?
So I see both sides of this, but I kind of come down on the side of, I don't think I'm going to be real nitpicky with semantics here. But
you should, as a dramaturg.
But I don't think we can, in good faith, call him the antagonist of the play, because the only way that really makes sense is if Malvolio is the protagonist of the play. he doesn't do enough, even though he does come in and out of various other plot lines. He doesn't do enough to be like a huge disruption or antagonizing force. Certainly not in like the main Orsino, Viola, and Olivia plot. He's there, he's present, and he creates mischief, but it's really only from Malvolio's perspective that we can actually see, these people as really creating this detriment, like, and actually being obstacles to progress. And I don't think we can actually look at Malvolio as protagonistic. We can see him as sympathetic, and I think that is a big trend, certainly in the past century, I would say. But if we kind of think back to Shakespeare's time, we can't know for sure because the author is dead, in case you hadn't heard.
Yes.
But
breaking news.
But I would wager that Shakespeare kind of hated Malvolio.
Absolutely.
So like, and we looking at it kind of from a much more, I would say, empathetic time, look at this person who, regardless of how stiffy and kind of unkind he is to the various people in his social/business circle, he doesn't deserve what happens to him, and it's just so grotesquely disproportionate to what he's done to them. And he gets his line at the end where I swear revenge, which I'm like 90% sure was just Shakespeare leaving it open for a sequel if the audience demanded it, as he did in some other plays, like possibly Love's Labor, possibly, or just even Merry Wives being an example of a sequel-esque play. Bring this character back, they're just so much fun. But yeah, I really think, to me, Malvolio strikes me as basically another Shylock. He's a character that, Shakespeare, being the great writer that he was, is able to find complexity and nuance in this character and make them empathetic. But I don't really think Shakespeare empathized with them, and kind of, Shakespeare gets a bit of a kick out of people like Sir Toby and Maria bullying this character, and that was just the fun popcorn B plot to give us a good laugh and not think too hard, in between a little romantic episodes between the real important story. And to kind of bring it back to the semantics that I started us with, if Sir Toby and Maria are not the antagonist of the play, this kind of, I think it was Alicia, you were bringing this up before, there really doesn't feel like there is an antagonist to the main thrust of this play or the play as a whole, because mistaken identity is the antagonist of the A plot. It's very much like very reminiscent of another play with twins, the Comedy of Errors, where there's enough that's going wrong just with confusing these two people that we don't actually need a mustache twirling villain to be like, ah ha ha, I am exploiting this situation for my personal benefit.
No Don John is needed in this.
Exactly. Or an Iago, for that matter.
Yeah.
This is just a whimsical circumstance that is able to kind of propel itself on its own comedic potential.
Yeah. I mean, Shakespeare definitely sets it up from his time period of people not liking Malvolio. I mean, especially in the garden scene where he is imagining his upper crust life. I mean, back then when class was such a huge part of that society, where people breaking class boundaries and doing what Malvolio talks about would have been a big let's get him. Like, he is upsetting the order, and he is getting too big of a head for himself. So I can totally see Shakespearean audiences turning against Malvolio in that garden scene where he is doing his routine in the garden, where it's like, I can totally see why. And Tom Rooney does a very good job of making Malvolio not likable in that moment of the play, where he is being snide and imagining putting Sir Toby down just because now I've married Olivia, so now I can do everything that I've ever wanted and done to say to you. Like you can definitely see that undertow of class struggle in this piece that Shakespeare loves to comment on and loves to kind of pinpoint someone to be like, stay in your lane, like don't elevate to. I don't think there's. I'm trying to think back in the Shakespeare case. I don't think there's really any Shakespeare play where it's like the servant ends up marrying some lord or lady or duke or duchess and changes classes by the end. Ryan, as a dramaturg, do you remember
Like,
any?
well, not one that ends up, but I kind of feel like Bottom and Titania kind of almost goes in that direction. We could say. I know. Okay.
Yeah.
There's probably others I'm just not thinking of right now, but
yeah, like I can't
point
think.
taken.
I'm sure. Comment down in the comments section.
Titania could not give consent because she was drugged.
That is
so.
true.
That is a big plot point in that.
Everyone's drugged in that play. It's a mess.
I as I said, I think you could do a really great tragic version of Midsummer. Like that is one of my go-to things when I want to direct that at something.
Oh,
is doing really tragic.
Fenton and Anne Page, kind of.
Kind of. I mean, aren't they kind of from the same social class?
Well, her parents don't approve of him, so there's got to be something sort of, lower echelon of him. Anyway,
it could just be his wart that he has on his forehead throughout the play. That Mike Shearer wonderfully wore in that production of Merry Wives. Then he takes off his cap, and there's just that big ass wart just prosthetically stuck there. It's great. Graham, what are your thoughts on this topic of villains and antagonists?
So I agree with Ryan that you cannot, in any stretch of the imagination, view Malvolio as the protagonist, and therefore is he the antagonist. I've always viewed him as an antagonistic force in this piece because he's just a dickhead for like most of the first half of the play, and that Malvolio is one of those great characters that you love to hate. And as an actor, I would love to play Malvolio because you just get to be horrible to everyone and then take a bow for it at the end of the show. Twelfth Night kind of reminds me of a literary structure out of Asia based on Chinese four-line poems, Kisho Tenketsu, that is a story based on proximity and not conflict. And so this show greatly reminds me, it's not that Twelfth Night does not have conflict, but the conflict does not drive the story in my mind. It's more about these characters being in circumstances together and just seeing how they kind of bounce off each other. Because, Donna, you mentioned that it is an ensemble comedy production. So it's just very bright, vibrant characters. And really put bright, vibrant characters in a room and you've got a play. So I think that what Shakespeare was saying with the Malvolio storyline, though, is that, you're not really you're supposed to feel good that they're getting back at Malvolio because you've seen him be horrible to them for most of the play, up to that point. And he is very full of himself, and you kind of, it plays to human nature to love to watch arrogant people fall. And the phrase, be careful who you meet on your way up because you'll meet them again on your way down, comes to mind. And that's kind of Malvolio. He's overleaping, I think in Macker's it's like vaulting ambition. Like he's trying to reach higher, and he has a very high opinion of himself. But then Sir Toby, especially Brian Dennehy, he played it really well. It's like, we'll have him bound and we'll put him in the dark. And it's like, it's this very like sour note in the middle of this. Like they're laughing at how much fun they're having about this. And then Sir Toby just comes in and just goes like, okay, next we'll do this. And it's like almost a franticness in that delivery of like, okay, like we have him on the ropes. We got to finish him off. And that's where it starts to tip into darkness. And that's where it starts to feel like, you're supposed to feel bad for Malvolio at the end. Like, I think it's just a comment on how you go too far. Like, you're getting back, you're not getting even. And it's wonderful to see Malvolio juxtaposed from where he begins the play being so put together versus where he ends the play being a complete shambles of who he used to be. And like Malvolio, like when I was younger, like Malvolio was my spirit animal. Like I was such a serious person. Anyone who remembers me in first year York, like I was so grumpy and grouchy. Ryan, you probably remember. I was not a happy person to be around all the time. But yeah, so Malvolio is the antagonist, but he is a sympathetic antagonist.
Love it. Love that. Okay, Graham, we're gonna let you kick off. Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead, Alicia.
I think I might have to change my answer real quick, or just add on to my answer. I know I think I was one of the first people to talk, but
yes,
I'm just gonna throw this in real quick. I think honestly, I was just thinking, who is the villain? And like, if we set this in a modern time, if Twelfth Night was done completely modern, I think it would honestly be Viola for pretending to be someone that she's not, because I feel like you could potentially get arrested for that, like identity theft. So deep
He doesn't
down,
steal anyone's pre-existing identity. There is no Cesario beforehand. It's not like she pretends to be her brother Sebastian, even though she might as well have, because they look exactly alike.
They did a great job casting.
Misrepresentation, though, can still lead to crime,
Mm-hmm.
like criminal charges. So I think you're right. Like Viola could be argued to be the antagonist, but I think
our next question is going to provide a counter discourse to that.
But great.
Okay, yeah.
That's an interesting interpretation. I would love, Alicia, I want to see that production where you turn Viola into a villain, an antagonistic character of the piece. But let's get into the next question, which is, how does this play lend itself to queer staging and interpretations? Graham, I know you probably have a lot to say on this because I know this is a big research topic for you. I mean, you brought it up greatly on our Shakespeare and gender roundtable we did. So let's dive into this. Graham, you're going to kick us off on this one.
So first off, 2 words: Sebastian, Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
They are very clearly, or at least Antonio is in love with Sebastian.
Yes.
I think Sebastian has to go and ruin it and marry Olivia. But that's just me. That scene where they have the first scene you see them together, where Antonio is saying, like, he's like on his knee, like Michael Blake gets on his knee, he professes his love for Sebastian, and at the time, yes, it was normal for 2 men to have, a kind of like
romance,
respectful kind of love for one another.
Homosocial bonding.
Yeah, homosocial bonding, not gay if you're on top. What? But that, like, those two, like, the fact that Michael Blake then gets to sing "If Music Be the Food of Love," that is something I did not remember originally seeing the production. I'm like, oh, we have another lover situation here as well. But
Des, you wild man, you.
A wild and crazy guy. So you definitely can see Antonio as a queer character. It's very, very easy. It's not even a hard leap to make. Plus, whenever you have switching of identities and the whole situation with Viola becoming Cesario, like, that's not necessarily a trans story, because, like, Viola is still Viola. She's just pretending to be a he for status. Like, this story has been seen a number of times through history. This is just, a much older version. So it's not trans, but there is definitely aspects of, like, gay love between these two, because Cesario, for all intents and purposes, is a man in the social network of this play. And there is a great fondness between Orsino and Cesario, and it would almost be fun to see a production kind of lean on that a little bit more, especially because we know that courts were known for some decadent behavior. So I think that's something that can be highlighted more, and we kind of got that a little bit in this production. As well as Malvolio in this production. Tom Rooney's interpretation very much reminded me of someone who is, like, very much like latent homosexual, like very in the closet, not accepting himself at all. And I remember from times when I was in the closet, I tried to keep myself emotionally constipated in order to avoid people finding out that I was gay, because I had such a shame about it. But the way, like, in Malvolio's monologue in the garden, the way Tom Rooney was playing it, he had, like, kind of like the crooked wrist and the hand motions and the playing with some rare jewel or other, and he talks about wearing velvet and all this, like, very, like, he's a very, like, cultured, worldly individual, and that could be interpreted as a queer individual, and wanting to marry Olivia for the status, but not necessarily because he loves her. It also could just be cover, like, I'm married to a woman, I can't be gay. But I think Shakespearean comedy can lend itself to queer readings a lot easier than tragedies, just because comedy is known for being light, frivolous, and campy, and well, a lot of gay comedy is known for being like frivolous and campy. So we have kind of some parallels here, and in Twelfth Night certainly there's a lot of room for queerness to be injected or just highlighted.
Well said on all fronts. Donna, what are your thoughts on this topic?
I totally agree with what Graham said, and I was really intrigued with what I thought was a same-sex relationship between, obviously, madly in love, Antonio and Sebastian. But I'm going to address Orsino the Opal, who's constantly changing. Mm-hmm. And I thought of David Rose and his wonderful line, "I like the wine and not the label." And I was asking myself, does Orsino like the wine or does he like the label? But I think what he likes is the fluidity. And he seems to want Viola to maintain her fluidity. Because at the end of the play, even when it's been revealed that she is who she really is and not Cesario in disguise, he's reluctant to have her shake off that male persona. He still calls her Cesario and calls her boy and says, you'll wear your boy's clothes in this situation, and in others you'll wear your women's weeds. So it seems to me that in his class, where he's going to be expected to produce an heir, things will return to a heteronormative status quo. But maybe he's thinking, well, when we have to publicly play Happy Family, that's when you'll wear your women's beads. But behind closed doors, we'll see what else happens. So I think it's really the fluidity that he's interested in.
Donna, I love your Schitt's Creek reference you just ever so nicely wove right into it. That is one of the best scenes of that entire show, is David doing his wine speech. Like, I think it's in either the first or second episode of that whole series, and it's so eloquently said.
It is.
And it's wonderful. And I never thought of Orsino that way, but wow, you really gave me a new interpretation of him with that concept. I love that. Alicia, what are your thoughts?
Donna and Graham summed everything up so nicely. But what really stuck out to me definitely was Orsino's relationship with Cesario. And I honestly genuinely feel like if it was, regardless of if Cesario / Viola, woman, man, whoever, I felt like the love was there, and it was so lovely to watch. We already talked about this moment. I believe, Mackenzie, you brought it up, but when Feste was playing music and you see Viola sitting, leaning on Orsino's leg, and Orsino just like gently puts his hand on the shoulder, and I was like, yeah, it was so adorable and so sweet, and just like two humans bonding over this moment. And I thought it was beautiful, and that really stuck out to me in terms of the queer essence of the play. I did see it a bit also with Antonio and Sebastian, but part of me was wondering, like, is this a moment? Am I seeing this? But now that Graham brought it up, I realized, yes, that there were hints of it there with their brotherly love, as they would say. But there was definitely like the passion and the love, and the scene. I think the scene where Antonio snaps at well, it was Viola, but he thought it was Sebastian. I feel like that reads even heavier if Antonio had a deeper love for this person. So yeah, I think I listed in total those 4 characters. I saw the moments of queer aspects of the play.
Also, Antonio is a sailor, I have to bring up. And that is a very...
sailor.
Hello, sailor.
And like, he reminds me so much, maybe, I don't know about in general, but certainly Michael Blake's portrayal here. Does anyone watch the Netflix reboot of She-Ra and the Princesses of Power?
No.
Okay, well, there's a character in that named Seahawk, who is basically just Antonio. He is a very flamboyant sailor who is probably pansexual by the logic of the show. Hard to say exactly, but yeah, just to all of my She-Ra fans, fellow watching this, that one's for you. But yeah, if I could piggyback off all of this.
Ryan, you were the next person I was going to call on. So
cool. So like, yeah, this was probably the question that I took the absolute most notes for, because there's just so much going on in this dimension of the show, and a lot of which have been brought up already, so I won't just repeat them, but worse. Instead, I do have two that I feel like haven't been touched on yet. So one of them is Olivia, also kind of demonstrates some sort of queer desire in a way. Not like from her perspective, it is still very heteronormative, because she thinks Cesario is a very young male, but male, so it's very natural for her to be so smitten and attractive. But we, the audience, know that that's a woman that you have instantly fallen head over heels over. And I think there is a dimension of maybe reading some queer nuances into what isn't Olivia being honest with herself about, and why has she so immediately fallen in love with this female individual, or who, let's be clear. Yeah, go ahead, Graham.
Also, that line, how wonderful, when she finds out that there is both a male and a female who look identical the same. Bisexual, right there.
Right, this is even better. Well, that actually brings me up to the other point that I wanted to bring up, is I think there's a really interesting queer dynamic with just the indistinguishableness of these twins. The fact that, sure, one of them is wearing disguise, but the fact that they look exactly like each other, that gender is played heavily throughout the play, but it almost becomes unimportant through the we could call it androgyny of these two people being so similar, despite their best efforts to conform to the gender binary. And I think a contemporary production could really needle into that as the critique that this play is making of gender categories. Yeah, and yeah, just the fluidity thereof. And yeah, as Graham has put in the chat here, which our viewers at home will not be able to see, but yeah, it really society's obliviousness to or the obliviousness to the fact that these people are the same. You don't want to interrupt, yet you are. Which he said in the chat, interrupting. No, anyway, those are kind of my main points that I was glad, hey, something that hadn't been brought up yet.
Yes, I mean, for me, like, I just went that this is one of the great Shakespeare gender bending plays. I mean, if you're going to talk about gender bending in Shakespeare, it's always going to come down to Rosalind in As You Like It, Viola, Twelfth Night, and Portia gets a lot, just considering she gets the one big scene in the courtroom where she does do gender bending. Where everybody kind of lumps those three together as like kind of like the gender bending trifecta, as it were, of Shakespeare. And I mean, this play just gives so, as we've talked about, it just gives so much to play with. And we talk, because once again, this is an isolated island where you don't have to worry about historical inaccuracy or other things that are or other type of dramaturgical problems that could come up if you start messing with one area or another area. This is such a beautiful isolated story that just allows a treasure trove of opportunities. I remember talking about this play in our Shakespeare and Gender Roundtable, where I said I would love to see a production where like a Duke Orsino becomes Duchess Orsino, and like doing some gender flipping within the loving like the lovers, and you get to kind of play with those inner dynamics. Like there's just so much you can do. Like I think you can even kind of go into a little bit of Sir Andrew and Sir Toby a bit, depending on how you play Sir Andrew. Where we're like, why is he always sticking around? Like if you want to play Sir Andrew's maybe a little bit smarter, where like once again, like he's this guy who is kind of there with Sir Toby all the time, but like it depends on how you cast Sir Toby and Sir Andrew. But you definitely can kind of, you could make them an older gay couple or like potential couple, like just the way they interact with each other. I think there's a lot you could play with in this that, unlike Graham, as you said, the Shakespearean comedies are much more flexible in what they can allow you to do, with the dramaturgical adaptation work you can do. And I think this is just one of those great plays. And I think that's one of the reasons why you read it in high school, is because there's so much you can kind of pick apart. And if you are someone who is part of the LGBTQIA+ folks Community, I think there's so much you can get into with this play, and I think this is one of the reasons why it's like, out of all the three gender bending Shakespeare plays, this is the one that gets taught most. Thank you, Grim. So the LGBTQI, hold on, I'm going to read it properly here so we can get it. It is the LGBTQQIP2SAA community. Thank you, Grim.
And if anyone watching your letter is not accounted for in the acronym, we apologize.
Yes. But if you're part of that community, I think this is such a great play that gives you so much you can play with, and it's so open to interpretation that I think that's why this gets staged a lot, is because there's so much in there that you can really play with. That you can do a Beach Boys Des McAnuff production. You also could do a totally different production that really leans into these relationships and really plays with those dynamics. So that's why I think this is such a great place, because it's just such an open text for interpretation.
Because Illyria is a fantastical place where anything is possible, it also kind of seems like you're transporting the audience into another dimension. So you can make up whatever rules you want. Like, why not make Duke Orsino female and still call them Duke Orsino? Why not have Olivia being androgynous, let's say? Why
female
not?
Feste.
Yeah.
I would love a female Feste.
Yeah, Feste is interesting because in this production I got the sense that Ben Carlson had a kind of affection for Olivia, and there was a bit of a romantic spark between them.
Yeah.
And I kind of get tired. I'm like, fine, everyone loves Olivia. What the? Why does everyone love Olivia?
Well, Sir Topham.
I know.
Not Antonio.
Not Antonio gets no love. Olivia gets all the love.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, it's just not fair. Anyways, I'll get into that in the answer to the next question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, yeah, sorry, this is kind of taking it in a slightly different direction, but before we leave the topic of queerness, like, you mentioned the fantasticalness of the fictional world, but I'd also to draw our attention to the actual nuts and bolts, real flesh and blood world of the theater when this was originally produced. Everyone on stage was male. And that adds a whole other queerness dimension to this, that it is a boy performer pretending to be a female character, pretending to be a male character.
Recently did that very production with Mark Rylance playing Olivia, and Stephen Fry was Sir Toby. So they just recently did a version of that, which once again just shows how malleable this particular Shakespearean text is, with those type of interpretations. Yes, Graham.
Yeah, and just to finish up my point on Feste, I think even though the romance was highlighted with Feste, you could almost play Feste as a genderless character, or a genderless and or asexual character, because Feste is foolery. Feste is the smartest character in the play. Yes. Feste has the biggest world picture of any character in Twelfth Night, and with that could be a kind of indifference to romance, or an indifference to the petty dramas and politics that go along around them, because they're just doing their thing. They're motivated by money, throughout. Ben Carlson getting money out of everyone in the play was so much fun to watch.
The amount of prop money that was used in that show. Ben Carlson would be rich easily, 10 times over. All right, let's head into the final question, though. Which is, what might Shakespeare be saying about love and marriage with the couplings at the end of the play? Donna, as a playwright, we'll let you kick this question off.
I think it speaks to the fact that love and erotic desire transcend gender. And I think that Shakespeare is also showing us those transformative powers of love that are able to carry us from that dark, isolated place of grief into hope and into the light of humanity. And that's really what I take away from it. I also noted that the characters easily transfer their love onto others. So Shakespeare is also saying something about the superficiality and fickleness in relationships, in loving relationships too.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'll piggyback right off you, because your second note is the one I picked up on. That I think Shakespeare is really not saying nice things about particular class marriages, where basically he's kind of calling them out, being like, either you're marrying for status, like Sebastian does, where he's like, lady of power wants to marry me. Do I know her? No, but hey, I get to move up in the social ladder, so just take me into that church. And then you also have Olivia doing the, well, you look like somebody I like, so who cares? so I think what Shakespeare then kind of goes with the Olivia and Orsino relationship is a good relationship is one that is developed over time and through conversation, where it's that building of the relationship over time versus what was happening a lot in his day and age, which was marriage for sake of class and status and power, not so much that. I mean, like, if you even look at his own marriage with Anne Hathaway, which was very much a shotgun wedding because he had impregnated her. So it's
but
like
he left her second best bed, so it all worked out in the end.
Yeah, sure. But it's that whole thing, like what was their marriage really like? I mean, he leaves for London and doesn't come back until he's aged out and kind of at the end of his life. So, I mean, what kind of marriage did he have there, really, when he's living 90% of his time writing plays in London? So, I mean, I think he's kind of really criticizing, and he does this a lot with some of his romances, where he really kind of criticizes the fickleness of these class marriages that would happen back in his day. So, yeah, that's kind of where I went. I kind of went the negative route of Shakespeare not liking marriage and kind of really calling out the problematic way that it's done. So, yeah. Ron, I see you scratching your head and giving quizzical looks. So
I don't disagree with anything you're saying. In fact, like, I'll take a very different approach to this question, not because I couldn't just parrot what you two have already said about it, but I don't necessarily know what Shakespeare is trying to say with this. I could infer similar along the lines that you have, but what I would kind of rather talk about is I would like to see new types of critiques of marriage and the institutions of these like Shakespearean couplings in contemporary productions. And specifically, I want to see the I almost said post-COVID because that's just the word that usually follows post these days. I want to see the post-Frozen production of Twelfth Night. Because what is the beautiful climax of this play? It is the reconciliation of two siblings who thought they were lost and realized that the true love is between them. And in the text, that is immediately undercut by, okay, now you're marrying her and you're marrying him. And now that you're both alive, we can settle this weird marriage conundrum. Frozen is a wonderful story about siblings who realize that they don't need to be coupled in the end necessarily, that they can really find this like important true love that saves them in the end with each other. So I want to see the post-Frozen version of Twelfth Night that doesn't stage the coupling, that ends with the reconciliation or the renewal of this relationship, that you're alive, I'm so happy, curtain, it's done.
But wouldn't that cut most of Sebastian's plot for like the last half of the play where he is like going into the church and everything?
It doesn't matter because he found his sister and he's happy now.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the version I want to see.
I suppose, Rang, if you want to play like that, just watch Measure for Measure.
Yeah, and I will, and have. But I want to see Twelfth Night specifically because the marriages feel so arbitrary at the end. I think a critique is worth leveling in this play in particular.
Alicia, I see you nodding along. Does this mean you agree that you want to see a post-Frozen production?
Yes, I would love to see a post-Frozen production. And I was also nodding along because when Ryan said, I'm not quite sure what Shakespeare was trying to accomplish, that kind of went through my mind too when I saw this question. But the second the play ended, the thing that stuck with me was, I guess true love conquers all, even through lies and deceit. Like, that's kind of what
true love.
That's what stuck with me. But then I started to think, well, was everybody lying? Not really. Viola was doing a lot of lying. And I guess Sir Toby and Mariah and their little scheme that had lying in it, but then they ended up falling in love too. And I found that I personally just didn't find that right. I found that relationship forced.
I think it depends on who you have as Sir Toby to sell that Mariah and Sir Toby love relationship, because of Brian Dennehy's age of being 70, and I forget who plays
Kara Ricketts.
Kara Ricketts, who is, I think
much
she was
younger
in
than
her late 20s,
him,
early
to say
30s,
the
so
least.
it's like, oh, big age difference there. That I think if you have a younger Sir Toby, you could build more into that staging over time of showing them falling for each other as the play progresses. But I think because of the age difference, they kind of really quickly shunted that plot line off, where it's like, surprise, they got married, and let's not talk anything about what's happening with them.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, Mackenzie. So yeah, I do take that into consideration. But I think, yeah, honestly, the main point felt very light to me, and I just started to think, like, I guess love wins. Everyone is happy. I don't know if Malvolio is happy though. ... But everyone else seems to be happy.
That's true.
The couples all seem to be happy.
Yes, the couples seem to be having a good time.
Everyone else, debatable.
Sir Andrew, not so much. Malvolio, not so much. We don't know about Fabian. He kind of just shows up.
Yeah. Fabian is literally there.
Yeah.
I'm entirely sure why.
Randomly. Like, I would love for them to stage it so Fabian shows up earlier in the play, like,
or just cut him all together, give his lines to Andrew, and it's fine. Or half of his lines
like,
to
Fabian is kind of like the manservant for Sir Toby. That's kind of there carrying the golf clubs, and kind of he's already kind of part of the gang from the very beginning. Because when he just shows up randomly in the garden scene, it's like, where did you come from?
Who are you?
You were part of this caper as well, I guess.
You weren't in the kitchen scene. You weren't in the golf course scene. You just kind of show up in the garden. And it's like, why? Shakespeare, what were you thinking?
I'm thinking he probably had someone in his company or in his troupe. They're like, oh man, I forgot to give them a role after he'd already written the first 2 acts. I'm like, okay, you are Fabian. You are their friend.
Yes. Graham, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I think what Shakespeare was doing, or maybe, I don't know, is I think there is, as Ryan said, a great ambivalence towards marriage. It's kind of arbitrary. It happens. It's not, it's kind of built up to be this big climactic moment, but it doesn't really get paid off that way because there are so many other things that come into the final scene, and marriage is just how Shakespearean comedies end. It's a formality, almost, to fit within the form of the time. And I think that there is a lot to be said about these marriages being about status. And, like, I think it's really problematic that Olivia seems fine with having married someone that she doesn't know, but who looks like someone who she was in love with. That's kind of something that we don't ever address, really.
Brushed over very quickly.
Very quickly. And with Toby and Maria, like, I guess it doesn't matter that they get married just because it is a single line that shows up in Act 5. And, but I don't think it necessarily, like, I don't perceive the age difference as being a problem in this play, because even though there are a lot of tropes of, like, older men preying on younger women, I didn't see that between Dennehy and Ricketts. I saw, like, and I think that what you could say with that is that age is just a number. Like, what if you fall in love with someone, like we've talked about Orsino falling in love with Viola as Cesario, and kind of embracing that fluidity, and kind of like there being a connection between them despite them being two masculine presenting figures in this play. But what about, like, Sir Toby, who would obviously be an older performer, and Mariah, who could be played older, could be played younger? What about them connecting, like, just in the same way that Orsino and Cesario connect, in a kind of affection growing despite of, like, outward appearances and what we think should happen? Like, the young should be with young and the old should be with old. Like, why can't the young and old be happy together?
They can be. I mean, there are some great relationships over time that age was just a number, and the age difference doesn't bother people. I mean, I totally am like, if that is who you choose to love, then no problem. I just think Des McAnuff really kind of hid that plot element and didn't as Alicia was pointing out, didn't build it up. It was kind of like a throwaway thing at the end where it's like, surprise, they're together, bye, out. And I mean, if you want to go that route, I think you could do something really sweet and interesting with an older Sir Toby and a younger Mariah who do find each other and find that common link of mischief together that kind of brings them together in that plotting brain of theirs. So,
yeah.
It just depends on the staging and just how you want to do it.
And yeah, because I guess my point, my final point after that long ramble is just it almost seems like it's highlighting how meaningless marriage can be, and how honestly, like, a lot of marriages at that time were based on convenience or based on status or based on any, like, pick your poison, but it wasn't love.
Yeah.
Like people didn't love each other.
You want to marry my daughter?
All the time.
Great, here's a chest of gold and a goat. Like, like that's basically what it was back then for a lot of people. Like, that's the whole plot of Fiddler on the Roof, right? It's that whole thing of like, great, marry the butcher. Yes, he's an old guy, but hey, he is solid. He's got money. Like, doesn't matter that you don't love him. Screw that. Marry off. Like, go on. Like, marry the rabbi's son because, hey, he's the rabbi's son. It's that thing of, back then it was just marriage of convenience or status versus marriage of love. Yeah. Oh my goodness. We made it. We made it through. We made it to the final question. Bravo, one and all. Yay us. Woohoo. We have made it through the wind and the rain, as Feste would say. So before we all go though, why don't we all give our socials a plug? Graham, we will start with you. Where can people find you if they want to follow up with you, engage you in a conversation, perform one of your plays?
So, best place to reach me is probably Instagram or Facebook. Facebook is just my name, Graham McClelland. And Instagram, it is Instagram, as in my name, spelled Insta, Grame, followed up by 999. A number symbolizing new beginnings. So that's just a beautiful poetic way to remember me.
Love that. And everybody's social tags will be in the video description. So if you are wanting to find us, you can always just copy and paste them right from the video description that Ryan beautifully writes for every episode we do. Donna, where can people find you?
You can contact me through my website, which is donnalatham.com. There's a link that you can contact me through if you'd like.
Love that. We most certainly will have that link right there. Alicia, where can people find and follow you?
I'm on Instagram. My artist Instagram is Alicia Plummer. So follow me there. I love to get new followers. And I also have a YouTube channel. I think it's called Alicia Online. I need to post more, but follow me there if you'd like.
Done. Ryan, give us your classic sign-off that we all love to hear.
Yeah, I'm not very easy to find on social media, so don't try. No, I'm only really on Facebook. And sorry, Graham, we should have asked you this before. Do you want friend requests from strangers on Facebook? Because I know I don't.
Yeah, personally don't. No.
We can still put your Facebook in there, but just know if you're watching this, no friend requests unless you know him personally. And that same goes for me. So you can just follow Cup of Hemlock instead.
But Ryan, what about if they want to engage you in like words with friends?
Well, I don't know what to say to that. No, it's okay. Just you can play words with friends with the cup.
Love that. Perfect. And you can follow me at Mackenzie Horner on all social media platforms. You also can follow my podcast, Before the Downbeat, a musical podcast. As of this recording, season 3 has officially begun. We just released our episode all about the Sondheim and Lapine musical Into the Woods. So stay tuned for more. We are doing a review of The Prom this holiday season, as well as we are doing a special holiday themed musical episode as well. So stay tuned for more of that. But until then, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. I raise a glass to all of you. Have a great, safe, and happy holiday season. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we will see you all in the very next episode. Thanks. Bye.